Welcome back to Half the Battle. I'm your host, as always, Daniel Levy, your guest co-host, Pepe Silvia. Today, we're going to be talking about UFC Vegas 75, Marvin Vettori versus Jared Cannonier, and it's going down this Saturday night live at the Apex in Las Vegas, Nevada. Two top five middleweights, both desperately want to get back to the title shot, and I think a win here is definitely going to help their case, Pepe.
Yeah, it's looking like a really exciting card. There might not be a ton of name value, but it looks like a lot of like action-packed fights. A lot of fights that should finish inside the distance.
Maybe not a lot of name value, but definitely some line value. So let's get down to business right away because in this main event, we got number 4 versus number 3. We got Marvin Vettori, he's 19-5, taking on Jared Cannonier, who's 16-6. And currently, they got it Marvin Vettori minus 115, the comeback on Jared Cannonier, slight comeback. I mean, if you even want to call it that, minus 105. So basically, a pick 'em with a slight lean on Vettori. So a lot of actions come in on Jared Cannonier, moving it from dog odds to, now it's a pick 'em, slightly on Vettori. Great fight. Great fight. I mean, basically, I haven't heard what anyone said, but what I would assume is Vittori's got this big volume edge, and should it go to decision, he's most likely to win. Possibly more paths should he be able to mix in takedowns. But here's my thing with this matchup. Jared Cannonier, if we're going to talk about the volume, I thought that he showed his last fight against a guy who's known for volume with Strickland that volume's not an issue for Jared Cannonier. I mean, he went out there in a 5-round fight, landed over 140 significant strikes. And how many did he attempt? He attempted 310 strikes. So volume is not an issue for Cannonier. And we already know volume is not an issue for Marvin Vettori. Prior to Jamal Hill fighting Glover Teixeira, Marvin Vettori actually held the record for most significant strikes landed in a light heavyweight fight, because you remember when he fought Paulo Costa, they had to move it up to light heavyweight because Paulo Costa was playing all kinds of games. He was doing the whole bit. So Marvin Vettori went out there and he landed a ridiculous amount of strikes. I mean, we're talking about 190, and he held the record in that division. And then Jamal did his thing to Glover and beat that record by a mile. But still, you're looking at two guys that are going to have really high output. But I think that Jared Cannonier, the difference here is that when his shots land, those are the ones that are going to make, the judges, I'd say the fans, but it's in the Apex, but the judges be like, ooh, and less fans in attendance. You're going to hear those shots more. So I see, Jared Cannonier landing the harder shots here. And for that reason, I jumped on that plus 100 when it was available. As far as, Vettori mixing in takedowns, I mean, I think maybe one or two, but I can see Jared Cannonier getting back up to his feet. So all in all, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I just think it's going to be an honest fight. I got plus 100 on one side. I knew that the market was about to move it, so at least beat the line. So now let's see what happens, right? So I see the volume being comparable, but I see the power difference being what gets Jared this decision. Should it go all 5, assuming that there's not a finish? Because if there is a finish, I lean Jared there as well. Marvin, not exactly known for being the heaviest of hitters. Don't get me wrong. He did drop Jack Hermanson. And, if you start to slow down against a guy like Marvin, that's when that output can really, really accumulate. But against Jared, who's totally battle tested, has been in there with the best of the best, I don't see, a finish threat from Vettori here. So, yeah, I'm going Jared Cannonier for the win.
Well, it's always good to start the podcast off with some disagreement. I respect the Cannoneer take. I lean Vittori, and for a few reasons. I think people are pretty low on Vittori after that Delize fight. I think it was a pretty bad look. He came in as like a minus 300 favorite. People were expecting him to blow through Roman. And he didn't. He had one of his worst performances ever. Although he did get the win, he put up pretty good volume. It looked like he was, cucking a little bit to Roman's power. And, I think if you remove that fight, we're looking at Vittori as a bigger favorite. I think the market was a little higher on him previous to that fight, and I think there's a little recency bias in this line. Um, and I don't think it's necessarily going to be a blowout, but I don't really agree with your take that if there's a finish, it's going to come from Jared because Cannonier's been finished a couple times, albeit not at middleweight. He was dropped by Derek Brunson when they fought, and if I know Vittori doesn't have like a ton of power or anything, but I think Brunson in that Brunson fight, it kind of showed that if someone is willing to, pursue the takedowns relentlessly, it gives Jared a lot to think about and that he can't just like focus on his striking. And I think a lot of this fight is going to come down to the game plan of Marvin Vettori. And, I think a lot of the reason why he was able to get off so much volume on Strickland was because Strickland didn't threaten with wrestling really at all. And Strickland's just like he's such a plotter. Like Marvin, at least he will like bounce around. I think he's got a little better movement. And like if you go back and watch the Costa fight, Vittori comes out way more aggressive. He's way willing to step into the fire. And he didn't do that against Dolidze. So I'm hoping he comes out with a good game plan. I hope he's trying to mix in the takedowns. Someone in the comments said a lot of cage pushing. I could see that as well. I think a lot of what is going to decide this fight is who's going to take the front step too. Um, Sean Sean was letting Cannonier do all of the front stepping, and I if Marvin's just on the back foot the whole time, letting Cannonier um, uses explosive striking and land the bigger shots and have the bigger moments, then yeah, he is probably going to lose. But I think with the age disparity and the slight volume uptick from Vittori, I like him at pick'em price.
No, I respect it, and I also respect the fact that you're not scared to come on here. You're not kissing my ass. You're down to go on the opposite side. So much respect. So let's see. I mean, like I said, I don't think it's going to be a blowout, but I thought that it should be a dead pick 'em. I know you disagree with that. You think that Vittori should be a bigger favorite. So I guess that's where we're going to find out what the deal is. As far as relentless takedowns, I mean, the last time I can point to Marvin doing something like that was, against Kevin Holland. I don't see him coming out here landing anywhere near the amount he landed versus Holland. Not that that even matters. He doesn't have to land 11 here to make your point, but that it's just the act of consistently, attempting takedown after takedown after takedown, which is a great strategy. As a grappler myself, I know firsthand that, you might stuff the first few, but if that guy's not discouraged and he keeps trying and trying and trying, that's going to discourage you. You're going to be like, damn, what do I got to do to get this guy off me? Um, like, are you convinced that Marvin is going to come out here and like attempt over X amount of takedowns here?
No, no, I'm not convinced. I just think it's like it would be uh, a very smart game plan, and he comes from a pretty good gym as far as game planning, despite how shitty Sean's game plan was against Jared when they fought. But yeah, it's like I know Vittori isn't gonna land a ton of takedowns. All I want him to do is just to try, just to give Jared more to think about because then Jared's volume is gonna wane when he knows that he has to deal with potential takedown threats as well. It seemed to give him a lot of fit in the Brunson fight and Marvin's a cardio beast. Not that like Jared like slows down a ton or anything or has like cardio issues himself, but at 29 years old opposed to 39 years old, despite Jared being in great condition, at some point the durability is going to go a little bit and the cardio is going to go a little bit. So I think it's a little buy low spot, but I do agree that it could be close. For sure. I just have Vittori at like minus 140 probably.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with your points. I mean, obviously, when you're getting up there in age, father time's undefeated, but I'd be more worried about that if he was fighting like Pereira or someone that's actually like a big threat, right? Like I just don't really see Vittori as that big, finishing threat, but that doesn't that's not to take away from him. I mean, the volume's on point. He's ultra durable. That's another thing, though. Vettori eats a lot of shots. I'm curious how he responds to these. I don't have any evidence that says he's going to get knocked out or anything, but I do have evidence that says Cannonier is the heavier hitter here for what that's worth.
And one of the bigger things that I'm concerned with on the Vittori side is the leg kicks, because Cannonier throws heavy ass leg kicks, and Marvin in the past hasn't shown that he's the best at checking leg kicks. So I'm hoping, he's worked on that a little bit. There's really not too much you have to really game plan for Jared. He's not like that multi-dimensional in what he brings, but you know, he has shown some weaknesses that Jared could exploit for sure.
Yeah. So as far as the leg kicks, normally I would give you a counter argument because this is orthodox for southpaw. It's a lot harder to get off on leg kicks against a southpaw, which is what Vettori is. But you saw that Anderson Silva fight, and I know Anderson, was on his way out, and this and that. But Anderson's a southpaw, and Jared had zero hesitation chopping that inside leg. So to your credit, maybe that's something he tries
Well,
here.
and he was switching stances pretty fluidly against Strickland too. So, I he can throw him from both stances. So yeah. But you saw Izzy like chew Marvin's leg up really, really bad, but Jared doesn't have the speed on his kicks that Izzy does. So yeah.
What line did you take Marvin at?
Minus 104. So
Okay.
slightish underdog. Um, yeah. Where do you think the line settles? Pick 'em?
Yeah, minus 110 apiece, minus 115 apiece. Book's trying to get, juice on both sides. And let's see what happens. So you got the minus 104 Marvin. I got the plus 100 on Jared. And let's see what happens. I'm excited.
Yeah.
So co-main event of the evening in the lightweight division, we got Arman Tsarukyan. He's 19-3, taking on Joaquim Neto BJJ Silva, who's 12-3. And currently, they got it Arman Tsarukyan minus 1,000. The comeback on Joaquim Silva is plus 700. So, um, this is not going to be the shit on Joaquim Silva hour. I got a lot of respect for him. I mean, he cashed a big dog bet for me against Jared Gordon, cashed like minus 130 against Jesse Ronson. If his nickname is Neto BJJ, but he's known for his brawling style. But this dude went out there in a grappling contest and submitted Neil Magny, who's way bigger than him. So his jiu-jitsu is legit, comes from that Evoluciao Thai camp, guys like Francisco Masuranduba, Trinaldo, known for coming out of there, tons of great fighters there. So the fact that he got the call for this, you know what that means. That means that tons of guys were like, no, I don't want to fight Arman Tsarukyan on 2 weeks notice. No, thank you. And Joaquim's a true warrior. So, I mean, like, what can I say? Much respect. But yeah, I mean, it's minus 1,000 for a reason. Tsarukyan's got that great style where he can attempt a ridiculous amount of takedowns, kind of like we were talking about earlier. Might stuff the first few, but when this guy's still trying for that 8th, 9th, and 10th, I mean, it's going to discourage you. Joaquim Silva, not exactly the fastest guy, but look, he can crack for sure. I mean, if Armen thinks that this is some kind of joke and he wants to draw a line in the center of the stand, in the center of the sand, and go toe to toe with Joaquim, I'm not saying that Armen would lose that, but all I'm saying is that would actually give Joaquim a chance here. But that being said, I mean, Armen's a big favorite for a reason, and he's going to win this dominantly, most likely. But you're not going to see me shit on a guy like Neto BJJ ever.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't shit on him either. I did cash on him against Magny in that grappling tournament. They actually had him
No
as
shit.
yeah, they had him as a dog, to Magny, and
Damn, I didn't even know they fucking had odds for that. That's cool.
yeah, I'm bet online, and he disposed of him quickly. Um, but yeah, for this one, I like the knockout round one for most of what I'm gonna put down on it, and then some knockout round two. Um, out of his three losses, two were by knockout, the other by decision. It just seems like the most logical and easy pick. Armin hits hard. Ask Giagos about that.
So you see it being more like the Giagos fight where he kind of just gets him out of there right away instead of more like the Frivola fight where Tsarukyan was this size of a favorite. And even though he clearly won the fight, I mean, he got 10 takedowns. He like tripled or quadrupled him up on strikes, but it was still more competitive than people expected it to be. You see it being more like the Giagos, where he just blows him out the water, doesn't play it safe, and gets it done.
Yeah, I think his striking has improved a bit since then. At his age, and his power has increased since then too. And he knows this is like a setup fight. He's full of confidence. I he's arguably you know the next best in the division after Islam in my opinion. So I'm interested in what they're gonna do with him next. I was talking to some friends and I was like, I hope they book Armen versus Oliveira if he wins. I doubt they will, just because it's such a kind of a jump in rankings, but uh, that would be a fight that could headline a card and or be like a pay-per-view headliner as well.
Why do I feel like we'd get a really good line on the Armenian?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I,
I mean,
I
Islam was only minus 160.
Yeah, but then, you saw what they lined it for next time. They like how they do those lines for potential fights. They have them at like minus 400 now for if it's rebooked.
Man, Islam was the discount of the century at minus 160 something against Charles
Yeah.
the first time.
Yeah, I think I'd like 6 units on him.
You talking about what in
Oh,
after?
On Makachev against Oliveira.
Oh, nicely done, nicely done. I played it to win 2 units, so it was like three something risk. So good for you. You
But
put the balls down on that.
I also lost on Benil, so,
I mean, shit happens.
for sure.
So featured bout in the middleweight division. We got Christian Leroy Duncan. He's 8-0, taking on Armen Petrosyan, who's 7-2. Currently, they got it. Christian Leroy Duncan minus 145. The comeback on Armen Petrosyan is plus 125. Interesting fight. So I gotta admit, I faded Leroy Duncan in his debut against Dusko. And okay, I can sit here and be like, oh, it was a fluke injury. But dude, up until that point, like the way this guy moves, I was like, God damn, like this guy is like freakishly athletic. The footwork's insane. He had a beautiful calf kick in there. And, I can sit here and be like, well, my guy lost via 1 minute injury. What would happen if it played out? Dude, if it would have played out, he would have got knocked the fuck out. I saw the direction that fight was going in. And I just kind of need to see Leroy Duncan in the UFC. And even though it was only like a minute or two, I still saw some things. But on the regional scene, the reason that I had a lot of hesitancy was, although that athleticism just really stands out, but I was worried about kind of the lower volume. I was worried about what would happen if guys would land takedowns. So here, Armen is not a takedown threat in this spot. What Armen could potentially bring to the table, he does have a kickboxing background and he does have good volume. He's landed over 100 significant strikes in more than one UFC fight against, Gregory Robocop, Hobocop, and also against AJ Dobson. But man, do you kind of view this as the volume, difference here for Petrosyan being worth the underdog stab, or do you just think this athleticism and just is this kid a phenom or not? Like the jury's still out, but it looked pretty promising in that debut.
So, first things first, I also bet Dusko against Duncan in that spot, and it was because of the takedown threat. Dusko had shown some pretty good grappling in his previous UFC fight, so I thought that he could implement that game and would have a better chance to win than his line implied. He was like plus 160 or something, and guy on his UFC debut, they lay an egg. Um, from time to time, so sometimes you have to play into that. But I completely agree with you. His movement was insane. The guy is super fast, super explosive, super athletic, and he's entering his prime. Like he's not even there, but you can kind of just in that like small amount of time, you could tell that his movement is much improved. And I think for this fight, well, I actually did. I ended up betting Leroy Duncan in this spot. With that huge reach advantage and the age disparity, him entering his prime, whereas Armen is kind of like, he's never impressed me that much. And in this matchup, I don't have to worry about CLD getting taken down. If anything, I could see Leroy Duncan landing the takedowns on Armen. Armen's takedown defense is terrible. That being said, I don't think he's gonna like blow him out of the water in the grappling or anything, but this kid hits hard. He's super explosive, with potential grappling upside. I got him at minus 125. I thought that was an awesome line for him.
Is there any truth to the fact that Leroy actually opened the underdog here, or is that some bullshit on FightOdds.io?
Um, I guess he did on Bet Online. He opened plus 145 and bunch of people hit it, whatever, and it went flipped a favorite right away.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that. You know, it's one of those things, man, where after that Dusko fight, and again, it was only like a 2-minute fight, but like what I saw there, I was like, okay, like this is translating at the UFC level. This guy, is a superior athlete. He is someone to keep your eye out for. And stylistically speaking, like you said, if anyone's actually going to land takedowns here, surprisingly, it would be Christian Leroy Duncan. You did see that do that. You did see him do that in some of his fights in England, and yeah. So I'm picking him to win as well. I do know some sharp opinion on Armen. They think that the volume difference is going to be big. They also bet on Dusko, and they felt like they're going back to the well for the same reasons. They think this guy's unproven, and they think that he still has a lot to show. But what I gathered was that, okay, so even though I lost the bet on Dusko, in a way I lucked out. And what I mean by that is this, because, I personally didn't make the excuse, oh, it was an injury. We didn't get to see the fight play out. But let me tell you this, man, if the fight played out, he was going to knock Dusko the fuck out. I saw that coming from a mile away once the fight started. Too bad I didn't see that going into the fight. But man, once the fight started, it was like, holy shit, they're moving on two completely different frequencies. And also, just because Armen has that striking background doesn't mean he can't be clipped too. I mean, you saw that fight where he got knocked out in like the first exchange a couple fights back. And yeah, I think the speed difference and athleticism difference is going to be big here. And I respect Petrosyan. There's a guy that, it's really hard to transition from another sport and be successful. And he's been able to do that. He even survived on the mat with a real black belt in Coyote, Ohio. Our boy McCall wasn't able to do that, right? So
Yeah.
I got respect for Petrosyan for sure, but I'm going to lean with the prospect.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell Leroy Duncan. He's only 27 years old, and he looks like he's going to be an athletic phenom. And he's just approaching his prime right now. I could see him getting a finish in this spot. It's a little narrative-y, but they got the London card coming up. It wouldn't be far-fetched to see him make some sort of statement win and then talk about the London card. There's a lot of Europeans on this card.
Yes, sir. So next up in the featherweight division, we got Pat Sabatini. He's 17-4, taking on Lucas Almeida, who's 14-1. Currently, they got it. Pat Sabatini minus 170. The comeback on Lucas Almeida is plus 145. Pepe, in your opinion, man, is it as black and white as if Lucas Almeida can keep this fight standing, he's going to light this man up for the sole fact that the volume difference is just massive, man. I mean, when you talk about Pat Sabatini, look, I respect the fact that this guy knows how to go out there and win those decisions, and he's been able to do that consistently. But man, the volume is so damn low, Pepe. I mean, the most strikes he's ever landed in a UFC fight was 36 against TJ Laramie, who couldn't even sniff a win in the UFC off the top of my head. Lucas, I think, is going to light him up standing. It's just, what do we know about Lucas on the mat? Well, what I've seen, I saw Daniel Zellhuber judo throw his ass in round 2. Granted, he was able to get back up, and that was a complete war. Besides that, I mean, did you see anything on his regional tape that leads you to believe he's going to be held down or grinded out?
Well, it's kind of tough because the people he was fighting on the regional scene are pretty shit compared to Pat Sabatini. Sabatini's really good at control grappling. The thing is, he's shown in multiple fights now that durability is an issue and his striking defense is an issue. Jamal Emmers dropped him right away in their fight. Luckily he showed the resilience to, turn it into a submission because Emmers followed him to the ground, but then he wasn't so lucky against Damon Jackson. And, who is Damon Jackson knocking out in the first round? So yeah, his chin is a serious liability in my opinion. That's why I could never lay the juice on Sabatini here. And there is regional footage of Almeida being taken down kind of easy by some bummish people. But he's never been submitted. He's never been finished. The dude has always shown a ton of resilience and a lot of fight. And he cracks. Trezano had never been knocked out before he fought Almeida. And so yeah, I think it is as black as white, just like how you teed it up. If Almeida's able to keep it on the feet, he's gonna knock Sabatini out.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, like, I hate having to bring out the coin because, like, when you're talking about what are the odds, plus 160, oh, now plus 145, a little action came in. I mean, like, if I'm even thinking about coin flipping, then I should just go ahead and bet Lucas off principle. It's just I'm gonna feel like the world's biggest dumbass when he gets college wrestled in this fight and
Yeah,
can't do shit. Doesn't get up. Like he fucking cracks him early, rocks him, then gets taken down for the entire fight. Did you see that fight between Matthew Semmelsberger and Jeremiah Wells?
Yeah.
Remember how Matthew Semmelsberger almost knocked him out at the beginning of the first and second round,
Yeah.
and then got held down for the rest of the fight? Like,
yeah.
I'm just not trying to go through that bullshit again. Like, even though, like I said, a split decision type fight, you should be on the dog all day, period. Like, you do that 100 times, I think you're going to come out on the right side of the coin. It's just, this is one of those that you have to accept that there's a very frustrating loss incoming if this doesn't go your way. It's not just going to be like a tooth and nail where it's like that split decision where you're like, man, you know what? I'll take the dog on the split decision all day. It's going to be the kind where like, you're like, Lucas, get up. Like, oh my God, like where you throw your remote at the TV. So that's, my hesitancy, but I'll still go with Lucas here.
Yeah, and Sabatini's wrestling is like legit, and
Yeah.
the thing is, like, we haven't seen a lot of Almeida's takedown defense as of recent. His regional footage is from 2019. So he could have made bigger improvements. I mean, he should be improving. So yeah, there's just a lot of unknowns. I'm happy to sit on the sidelines for this one.
Now, next up in the lightweight division, we got a banger. We got Nikolas Motta. He's 13-4, taking on Manuel Loco Torres, who's 13-2. Currently, they got it. Manuel Torres minus 180. The comeback on Nick Motta is plus 155. So, firstly, for all y'all that have never seen that Nick Motta versus Robert Hale fight, I say it every single time Nicholas Motta fights. The only place that you can check that out is on the Half the Battle YouTube channel. So make sure y'all subscribe if y'all want to see what happened between Nicholas Motta and Robert Hale, because they had a 1-round insane fight. Robert Hale ends up knocking him out, but there was a double knockdown prior to that. It was just absolute pandemonium. So make sure y'all check that out on my YouTube channel. Just type in Robert Hale highlight reel. Now, as far as Nick on his regional scene, I mean, he fought some good dudes. Robert Hale, like I just mentioned, he beat Joe Selecki in a fight that he was getting dominated, comes back. And when I tell you that was a brutal knockout, I mean, they had to bring out the smelling salts. They had to bring out the stretcher. It was devastating what he did to Joe Selecki. But on the flip side, Nick has been chinned multiple times, not just Jim Miller, not just Robert Hale. Also, when he was on The Ultimate Fighter, I know he got rocked there as well. And Manuel, if there's one thing we can give him, this guy cracks. This guy can bang. And I feel like, even though these last two fights, people can say, well, they haven't been past the first round, we don't know. I feel like physique wise, he looks completely different. I mean, he's been, you can get those supplements in Mexico over the counter. You don't need a doctor's prescription. You just go to the local pharmacy and get whatever you want. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not even fucking joking. Like things that here, you know how like you used to be able to get your doctor to call in your prescription to the pharmacy, you go pick it up. Like I'm talking about the kind of drugs where you have to literally go pick up the prescription itself from the doctor and take it to the pharmacy. Like the doctor can't just call it in. You get all that shit over the counter in Mexico. So Manuel Loco Torres, his last two fights, now granted they've been short fights, but like I said, the physique looks different. His hands, everything he throws is with insane amounts of power and looking to finish you with every shot. But on the flip side, with that style, if he does get extended, that's where I have my concerns. So I see him being the longer fighter here, and absolutely he's live for a knockout. Motta has been put out before, but I do feel like should this fight get extended, Motta is kind of the more savvy vet, and Motta might, if he can find his timing and not be too badly compromised in the early going, he might be able to take over as the fight progresses.
Yeah, it pains me to go against my Mexican brother because I'm usually all Viva Mexico when it comes to betting UFC, but I had to take Samata in this spot, and you broke down the fight really well. But for me, what it comes down to is the striking defense and um, just the technical differences that they have. I think Mata is the much more technical, much cleaner striker. Going back and watching Torres's past couple fights, he leaves way too many openings. His striking's like insanely reckless. So I think there's a couple paths of victory that Moda can take. To beat Torres in the spot. And, like I said earlier, when we were talking about Marvin, he comes from a good game planning gym. And I'm hoping that they have a decent game plan. Like, all you have to do is tire this guy out, not get clipped within the first couple minutes, and Moda's going to win. And Moda's counter boxing is super clean. Like, if Torres is striking like he was against Camacho, he's gonna leave plenty of opportunities with his chin out, and I think that Moto will be able to take advantage of it. And if not, I think it would be smart for Moto to try to grapple and try to wrestle and get Torres tired and get those muscles working, and because before he landed the knockout shot against Camacho, Torres was slowing down. So yeah, I think this is a solid spot for Moda, but it is going to be dangerous for like the first couple minutes.
So you were alluding to how you said Marvin Vettori, the camp he's training at now, Motta, the camp he's training at now. So correct me if I'm wrong. So Marvin went from King's MMA to Extreme Couture, and Motta went from like Frankie Edgar in New Jersey with them. He's at Extreme Couture now, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're really building a nice little roster over there of fighters. I mean, even Joaquin Buckley after the Curtis fight, now he's training with Curtis. So it's pretty cool to see what they're doing. I mean, Eric Nixick, top-notch coach as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, he's getting a good look. But bottom line, it comes down to that same dynamic. Like we're gonna be puckering our buttholes those first few exchanges because Manuel throws, Manuel chucks, Manuel looks to take you out. True Mexican warrior, big improvements from his regional scene, and like even the shots he was throwing at Camacho. I know Camacho is a punching bag. You don't got to tell me, but like man, like the sounds of those shots, it was like oh my god, like 100% into every shot. So Nick's got to be, he's got to be aware of this early. And if he is, like you said, we've seen on the Contender Series that he's evolved from just being that in his words, he called himself a Brazilian jungle boy, right? And like meaning that he's just like this brawler. But I think he showed in that Contender Series fight that like, hey, like I can go 3 rounds too and pick someone apart. And even Dana criticized him, saying he wasn't sure if Nick had the killer in him, which actually made me laugh because as someone who's watched Nick's entire career, just because like he was fighting on regional scenes next to me, fought one of my best friends, Robert Hale, fought Joe Solecki, who's, here on the East Coast. to me, he's always been this Brazilian killer. So when Dana was questioning his killer instinct, I was like, actually, that's a big sign of maturity for Nick Motta, because, you know, Dana hadn't seen his previous fights. I've seen his previous fights. So I thought that was a big step in the right direction. We can write off the Miller fight. You know what happens when guys fight Miller on their UFC debut.
Yeah.
But
that loss is aging well.
It is, right? It is. It's just, we know that he can get chinned here. And we can't act surprised if that happens. And we can't, you know, try to act like, you know, if he gets chinned in the first like 2 minutes, like, you know, you don't tweet out how you were on the value side. Just give your props to Torres and move on.
Yeah, you can't call it a meme.
No shit. But yeah, no, I feel you. Dog or pass situation here. And I hope Motta wins, because you know, that win will look good for my boy Robert Hale, who I want to see in the UFC here soon. So let's go, Nick.
I think the UFC likes both of these guys too, because they gave them 2 tee-up spots in their last fights, you know, against Camacho and against Cameron Van Cam. You know, so I think they're trying to see who the real prospect is, and it should be a fun one.
Another interesting thing, just purely kind of like doesn't matter, but kind of cool. You know that, so remember how like Trey Ogden was supposed to fight Manuel Torres, and then Ignacio stepped in, and then Ignacio was supposed to fight Motta, and then Torres stepped in. So they've been playing a little bit of musical chairs.
Yeah.
But next up in the welterweight division, kicking off the main card, we got Muslim Salikhov. He's 19-3, taking on Nicolas Dalby, who's 21-4. Currently, they got it. Muslim Salikhov, it just depends where you look, everywhere from -185 to -190-ish. The comeback on Nick Dalby is +165. Listen, man, Nick Dalby's a tough out, you know, and he's a guy that, honestly, I think that even though he's getting closer to 40, he's like in his peak form right now. He's really figuring things out, and he's got some low-key great wins on his resume, man. Like, even dating back, UFC debut, beats Zaleski in Brazil, goes to a draw with Darren Till back when Darren Till was, you know, the man. You know, I'm talking about Darren Till with confidence, not Darren Till that asked to leave the UFC. And then, unfortunately, you know, he had those setbacks, got cut from the UFC, built his way back up, comes back in there. And here's my thing with Nick Dalby. It's like, he's one of those guys that, like, you'll like drop his ass in the first round, but if he's still there, like, third round Nick Dalby in some fights was like a mythical creature, like that Darren Till fight. He just puts it on dudes in that third round, which is ironic because his last fight against Worley, he actually slowed down badly in that third round. But granted, he actually put up the most output he's ever put in any single fight. I actually bet Worley there +125, and shout out to Dalby, man, you know, prove me wrong. But man, I just see, besides the Worley fight, I think he gets hurt in way too many fights. I think that he gives up a lot of bad positions in too many fights. I think historically his volume's on the lower side, despite that last fight against Worley. And then here with Salikhov, also a low volume guy, but I think Salikhov is infinitely more dangerous than Nick Dalby standing. And Dalby, how many times has he been dropped in UFC competition? It's actually not as much as I thought. Once against Ronson, once against Sabata, once against Cummings, once against Darren Till. I mean, that's still, you know, he's still 0 for 4 in his knockdown ratio. Muslim Salikhov can put people out. The thing I'm worried about is I do give the cardio edge to Nick Dalby. If he can survive some shit here, this gets to that third round, that's where I kind of see Nick taking over. But man, I think that on the feet, I think that just the fear of what's coming back at him is going to kind of make Dalby resort back to his lower volume ways, and the firepower difference is huge. And I do think that there's going to be some knockdowns, whether it's with the famous spins, whether it's with a check hook, whatever the case may be. So I do see Muslim, you know, just landing the more damage here. And if it goes to decision, that gets him the win, but I'm not riding off a knockout either. And Muslim's been a guy that I've been undefeated betting. That doesn't mean I can't lose, but, you know, I did bet him against Nordin Taleb. I think underdog odds against Zaleski, Pick'em. It's funny. I said no guy named Muslim's losing a judge's decision in Abu Dhabi, and that's exactly what happened. It was a close-ass fight. Bet him against Trinaldo. Thank God I passed against Li Jingliang, and then I bet him against Fialho. So I have a good history with this guy, and there's a reason I faded Dalby against Warley Alves, and I give him all the credit in the world for that win. You got it fair and square. I'm not going to discredit him, but I'm going to go back to the well, and I'm looking to fade Dalby again. As long as it doesn't go to minus 200, then I'll pass. But minus 175, minus 185, I think I'm trying to take a look here.
Yeah, for me, it's a dogger pass situation. And like you said, Dalby looked almost career best in his last fight against Alves, and I did have a bet on Worley in that spot at plus money.
Real quick, why did you bet Worley there?
Because I thought that he was going to start out hot and win the first round at a high clip, and if I needed to, I could live bet my way out of it. And I thought that Worley would be able to, hurt him in the first round and maybe lock up a submission. It was in Brazil. Yeah, Worley's usually really dangerous early.
Absolutely. And it's funny. Worley's the guy that wins the third round, which is something I would have never predicted. I thought it was going to be the opposite. I was like, bank the first 2 rounds and then just coast in the third round and we got this, or finish him along the way. And then the opposite happened.
Yeah. But what impressed me from that was the amount of volume that Dalby was able to put up on him. And, as much as you said that, Dalby's been dropped in multiple fights, which he has, but Muslim has been hurt. He got hurt in his last fight against Andre. He almost got finished. Granted, Andre cracks harder than Dalby, but fight before that, he got knocked out by Leach. So,
but I mean, that's one of the heaviest hitters in welterweight history.
True, but he's 39 years old. So it's just
that is true. That is true.
It's enough. It's enough cause for concern that it's a dogger pass situation for me. And with the amount of volume that Dalby was able to put up, I'm not really sure how the grappling is going to go in this fight. I think they're both going to try to get takedowns. And yeah, I think there's a lot of variance in this fight. And, for that reason, I think Dalby's the side.
Now, next up in the bantamweight division, we got Raoni Barcelos, 17-4, taking on Miles Johns, who's 13-2. Currently, they got it. Raoni, just depends where you look, minus 211 on Bet Online, plus 181 for Johns. What's up with why is it not minus 210 plus 180? Why is it minus 211 plus 181? Do you know the science behind that?
Well, no, I don't know. They probably had it at minus 210 and someone bet it and they felt like they had to move it 1 point.
Like 0.01. Like,
yeah.
That's great. So, so minus 211 plus 181. Okay, so these are the kind of spots that I love. When you have a guy with low output versus a high output guy, I always love taking the high output guy. This is an angle that I've been doing for years. I mean, even Raoni's last win against Trevin Jones. Do you know what the numbers were in that fight, my man? It was like the kind of numbers that'll make you smile. And they made me smile as well. On total strikes, listen to this. Raoni outstruck Trevin Jones 119-15. 119-15. You know what I'm saying? Got a knockdown in there as well. Got 2 takedowns. Like, when he goes up against these low output guys, he schools them. I think that when we talk about the Victor Henry fight, what you got to put context in is that Victor Henry attempted 397 strikes. I repeat, if you round up, Victor Henry attempted 400 strikes. Like, the individual rounds of that fight are, there's more output in the individual rounds of that fight than there are in entire Miles Johns fights, right? Like, for example, Raoni landed more strikes in round 3 against Victor Henry than Miles Johns has in almost every single UFC fight he's had, besides the Anderson Dos Santos fight. So right away, the volume difference is huge. Now there's a narrative about, look, Ioni's getting up there in age, coming off a knockout loss. I'm more worried about the getting up there in age than the knockout loss, because that was the first and only time he's been dropped and knocked out, and that was against an absolute phenom. And he wasn't scared of the phenom. He went after Umar and tried to fight him like a man. Got caught with a slick ass combo. Like people were like, "Oh, that didn't look like a big shot," but it's the ones you don't see coming that are, and especially if it's on the right spot. And Umar set him up nicely, kind of blinded him with the same side kick before he went to the same side punch. And hey, beautiful stuff. Miles Johns isn't built like that. But what Miles Johns does do, he's got kind of like that Woodley style. He's short, he's compact, he's going to back himself up into the fence, and he's going to try to time some big bombs. That's what Miles Johns does. Against some lower level opponents, Miles Johns will be able to mix in wrestling from time to time, but here I see him doing that kind of Woodley game plan. Back yourself into the fence and try to time a big overhand, a big uppercut, a big left hook, whatever the case may be. But if he's not able to do that and put Ioni out, I mean, if this fight goes 3 rounds, when you zoom out and you look at the box score, I mean, I think that it's going to be Ioni doubling him up on strikes. I think it's going to be Ioni that's got more takedowns landed, submission attempts, possibly even knockdowns. So yeah, I like Ioni here. I think the thing with Ioni is this: is the only thing that's holding him back is his age. Besides that, I mean, if this dude was 32 years old, he'd be a top 5 guy as far as I'm concerned. But what is he, 36, 37, something like that, getting up there in age? So the skills are there. It's just, the body is kind of, on the decline a little bit, but I still think he's good enough to beat Miles Johns. So I think Miles Johns is KO or bust in this spot, unless Ioni's so, uncharacteristically gun shy that the volume's not there, which I just don't see happening. Yeah, this is a volume spot. Give me Ioni.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I like Barcelos in this spot. Yeah, Johns is a fade for me in general, anyways. And then you match him up with someone as talented as Barcelos. I think it's a slam dunk. Um, I guess you do have to worry a little bit about the age and durability, so you can't make him like minus 500, but minus 200 is good for me. You really gotta question Miles John's decision making when he leaves Fortis MMA to go train at Glory MMA. And right after he got to Glory, the gym gets shut down. So he's been training at Trey Ogden's gym. Um, so yeah, he's at like the worst camp he's ever been at in his career. He has terrible durability. He's low volume. I think it's easy for Ioni.
Yes, sir. All right. So this is an interesting one. Next up in the flyweight division, we got Jimmy Flick, the former LFA champion. He's 16-6, taking on Alessandro Costa, who's 12-3. And is he also? No, he's a former Lux fighting champion, not LFA. Currently they got it Alessandro Costa minus 245. Did I say Alessandro Ricci earlier? I hope I didn't say that. Do you remember Alessandro Ricci, the guy Paul Felder knocked out with that disgusting elbow a few years back? He was like a dude that came into the UFC, went 0-2, was gone. But anyways, so Alessandro Costa minus 245, Jimmy Flick plus 210. I get the fade on Flick, but what do we know about Costa? What do you know about Costa? Because I get it. Flick, it's basically submission or bust. He's gotten his ass whooped in both his UFC fights. The first one pulled off, a miracle flying triangle that if they ever ran it back, I think Cody would beat his ass. And then the next fight, Charles beat his ass. And then, he retired. He's doing the whole bit. I don't know where his head's at, but I know how good he is on the mat. I know how good he can be on the mat. What's Alessandro Costa got? Because I feel like there's a chance that he's being overrated from that Albazi fight. Like, I don't think, like, people were talking about how good he looked against Albazi. I disagree, man. I mean, I thought that the first round, Albazi took his time to make some reads. He's completely unfamiliar with his opponent, has no idea who he is, plays it a little bit safe. And then the second and third round, he beat the living shit out of him. So, do you know more about Costa than I do? And, are you well versed on his regional fights?
Well, what I can tell you is that he's a black belt trained under Diego Lopez,
Oh,
who is a super high level
yep.
BJJ player. So I think he is someone who you can trust his jujitsu defense. And when you have a matchup with Jimmy Flick, as long as you can defend the submissions, you're gonna win. So I think this is pretty much a slam dunk spot for Costa. I kind of think that Flick kind of came back just as a money grab, just to get a couple paychecks and some free meals from the UFC. Um, not completely shit on the opportunity that he had. But he's shown that he can't take a punch. If the fight gets extended and he can't get a, random submission, he's not going to win. So I think that Costa should handle business, but it's just like, how much juice do you want to play on a guy who's 0-1 in the UFC and still young in his career?
You had me at Diego Lopez black belt. So thank you for letting me know that.
Yeah,
And
Viva Mexico.
yes, sir. Well, Alessandro is Brazilian, but Viva Mexico,
Well,
anyways.
he trains in Mexico.
Does he?
Yeah.
Are we talking about the same Diego Lopez that fought Movsar?
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh
the
shit!
the BJJ coach for Alexa Grasso and who else?
Irene.
No. Or yeah, Aldana too, yeah.
Hey, dope. Great. That's all I need to know.
Yeah, you saw how slick he was too when he fought Mavzar. Everyone thought he was gonna run through him, myself included.
Yeah, I mean, he gave a great account of himself for sure. Costa's the pick. Next up in the bantamweight division, we got Mr. Perfect Kyung Ho Kang. He's 18-9, taking on Christian Quinonez, who's 18-3. Currently, they got it. Christian Quinonez minus 158. The comeback on Mr. Perfect is plus 138. So I bet on Christian Quinonez's last fight against Taha, kind of like what we were talking about with the Barcelos and Johns or Barcelos and Trevin Jones. Same reason. I mean, Khalid Taha has no output whatsoever. It's kind of a KO or bust guy. And Christian Quinonez is a volume guy. So I was just like, all right, just double him up on strikes and we're good to go. And then he ends up knocking him out in the first round. Even better. So thank you, Christian. But here's a little bit different because Kyung Ho Kang is a very seasoned vet of the sport. He showed his last fight a career best output, kind of like Dalby did. It's kind of cool to see these guys. They've had these long ass careers and they're still making strides. So I love to see it. Christian kind of reminds me of his brother, Teco. You know what I mean? Just like with a better chin, slightly bigger, maybe a little bit more potential. But this is a fight I'm worried about because, like I said, I was confident against Taha. You know, no volume versus volume. I love those spots. But here, Kyung Ho, seriously experienced vet. The only concerns is like Kyung Ho kind of fights close with everybody, right? So it's not like I think Kyung Ho is going to blow him out the water. But do you think Kyung Ho has some vet tactics waiting for this kid and possibly hand him his first UFC L?
I think it's possible. I think so I got the opener on Quinonez at plus 145, I think.
Oh shit.
Yeah, because I looked into this fight early and I had it capped as a 50-50 fight. I think it's kind of hard to predict how it's actually going to play out. It should go the distance. Um and I think they kind of represent almost like a mirror matchup. They're both like somewhat low volume, but just from like a career trajectory standpoint, I thought I give this slightly into Quinones, and I knew the line was going to come in, so I jumped on that one early. But I wouldn't bet him at juice in this spot. Kang is like, he could give him like a vet lesson, but it's just, I don't know. I think Kang's aside at the current price. You can't lay juice on Quinones with his lack of experience.
I feel you. I mean, like I said, the Taha fight was a different price, a different situation. Um, Man, and you got a good price and the limits weren't too low or anything like that when you got that dog odd?
No, I mean they let you put up to $1,000 on it, and you have to remember that that Taha fight was on short notice too. I mean, Khalid Taha is like not anything really to write home about, but going across the world and getting a first round knockout, he's still young enough to be making improvements, and he's another Mexican warrior.
No, he really is, and I love his style. It's kind of like a Mexican Dominic Cruz. He's a little herky jerky, unorthodox footwork, lots of feints, and he's always throwing something. So you love to see it. And then Kyung Ho Kang, I mean, dude, this is a guy I've been watching. How many fucking years have I been watching this guy? Since 2013. He's just a true OG, true vet. And I mean, sometimes he's gonna school these young kids, not school them, but out, just edge them out, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if he did that here, but I'm gonna lean with the young gun, but not
Well,
interested at the current price.
yeah, that's the thing with Kang. Like his margins are always so thin in his victories. It's just like, that's why you kind of have to think in this spot, it's probably going to be another close spot. Look at all the split decisions he has on his record. And, he's always shown good durability. Um, it leads me to believe it's probably going to be another close decision, one on thin margins.
Now, before we talk about the last 5 fights, starting off with Carlos Hernandez versus Dennis Bondar, everybody do me a huge favor. Smash the like button. Subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And when this is over, leave me a comment. And then also follow Pepe at Pepe_Sylvia716. Now, next up in the flyweight division, we got Carlos Hernandez. He's 8-2, taking on Dennis Bondar, who's 16-4. Currently, they got it. Dennis Bondar -129, Carlos Hernandez +109. So line flipped. It opened with Carlos being the favorite here. And Dennis is a guy that came into the UFC with a lot of hype. But when you watch his regional fights, look, he did his thing for sure. He's a decently strong grappler, some good submissions, and he's gonna, at least he's gonna attempt takedowns. He's gonna go for it as far as the takedowns are concerned. He may even land some takedowns in this spot. I did have issues with the level of competition. I also had issues with the level of physicality. I think that he's a guy that at the UFC level can be bullied around, and the striking defense wasn't the prettiest either. Now, on the other side with Carlos Hernandez, you could say he's got less experience, but he's fought much better competition. I mean, on his contender series fight against Daniel Barez, who I think will be in the UFC one day. I mean, look, it might not have been Sodiq Yusuff, Mike Davis. It might not have been Raulian Paiva versus Alan Nascimento, but I'd still put that, Daniel Barez versus Carlos Hernandez fight up there with like top 5 to top 10 contender series fights ever. That was a dog fight. And I remember tweeting during that fight, like, sign both these guys. They're absolute dogs. They went for it. And I thought they could compete with guys at the UFC level right then and there. So he gets signed. First fight is against the LFA champion Victor Altamirano, and they had a spirited battle, man. And I thought Carlos edged it out. Next fight against Alan Nascimento, who's got way more experience, but legitimate way more experience, not padded record more experience. I'm talking real more experience. Alan did his thing, and Alan's going to do that to a lot of guys. So that, I mean, if anything, I take it as a positive that, you learned you're not invincible. You learn that there's another level. Now you go back to the gym. He's training with great people, Valley Flow Striking. He's got Bilal Muhammad, who I think is one of the best minds in the game. He's got Yair from time to time there. There's a bunch of other great fighters there. Let's not talk about Juliana Pena, even though she's won a belt, but I can't fucking stand hearing her talk. But I bet in the gym she's not annoying like that. I think. Who knows? But hey, can you hear me okay? It says my connection's fucked up.
No, I can hear you.
Okay, great. So now it's time for him to bounce back. I think there's paths to victory for both. I think that on the feet, even though Carlos isn't much of a KO threat, I think that he's a threat in terms of out voluming someone, and he's always going to be active. He's always going for stuff, sets up some really nice body shots. And honestly, I like everything about Carlos Hernandez in terms of his game. What I don't like is he's not the most physical. He's not the most athletic. So there's going to be times when guys can absolutely bully him. And I do think that Dennis Bondar can land takedowns in this fight. It's just that if Dennis Bondar can't hold him down or can't submit him, I think he might end up getting lit up on the feet. Not necessarily knocked out, but just kind of outpointed. So I see it being a really close fight. I'm going to lean with the underdog, Carlos Hernandez here.
I don't blame you for leaning with Carlos at the current price. I played Bondar at plus 120, and the reason that I played him at plus 120 was, I factor in a lot of things when it comes to capping these fights, and one of the things that I analyze is the market value. And, Bondar, when he fought Malcolm Gordon, was a minus 350 favorite. And, you can say what you want about the fight, but in actuality, it lasted what, 90 seconds? And then he had an arm injury. So I'm really not going to draw too many conclusions off someone's debut where the fight lasted 90 seconds and then there was an injury. Um, and so, like, keeping that in mind, where he was a minus 350 favorite and he got injured in the fight, um, I think it's kind of an overreaction to have him as an underdog to Carlos Hernandez, someone who gives up takedowns quite easily, and someone who, when he wins, it's on thin margins. His two victories have been split decision wins. So I mean, I'd rather take the guy underdog odds who has the grappling upside. So yeah, I played Bondar, but I do think that there is a chance that he's like a complete fraud, like, because his regional opposition is awful, except for he does have a win over Steve Erceg on regionals. And, that win is obviously aged pretty well in the past couple weeks. So I think there's a lot of unknowns with this fight. I'm super excited to see how it plays out. But yeah, I took Bonder when he was plus money.
I mean, if we're going to talk about amateurs, Carlos, ironically enough, also has 2 amateur wins over guys currently in the UFC.
Yeah,
Charles Johnson
Charles.
and Jose Johnson.
And over Andy has a win over Brandon.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, they're both. Here's the thing: it's like, how good was Steven Erceg back then? I didn't watch the fight, because it was an amateur fight. Like, so was it like 3-minute rounds? Because some of these Denny's Bonders fights, they weren't even in the ring, and as soon as the fights would go to the ground, they'd stand them back up right away. Like you saw, you know which one I'm talking about. His last loss prior to Malcolm Gordon, when he's
Yeah.
fighting that bigger Russian guy.
Yeah, some of those Ukrainian regional fights are fucking weird. And you can't even find all of them either. So there's a decent amount of guesswork into, what his ceiling is, what his potential is, if he's already met that, if he's fraudulent, how good his grappling is. So I think questions will be answered in this matchup because Carlos is super well rounded. Nascimento is an absolute stud, and I bet Nascimento ITD against him in that spot. But, I'm not like foolish enough to think that Carlos's grappling is going to be anything like Nascimento's, but Nascimento was a minus 350 in that spot. So, yeah, I just think there's a little overreaction, but we'll see.
Would you bet Bonder at the current minus price?
No, probably not. Probably not.
Now, next up, also in the flyweight division, we got the UFC debut of the LFA champ, Felipe Bunes. He's 13-6, taking on Zhalgas Zhumagulov, who's 14-8. Currently, they got it. Zhalgas Zhumagulov minus 170. The comeback on Felipe Bunes is plus 145. So there's been a lot of talk about why did this guy get signed, this and that. I mean, I thought he looked pretty fucking good on his regional fights personally. And even when you look at his fight against Jussier, so it's supposed to be a bantamweight fight. And this dude, Jussier Formiga, what does he come in at? He came in at, they don't have it on Tapology. They said 139, but I thought he missed by like 15 pounds. Were they initially scheduled to fight at flyweight and then they moved?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what it was. Yeah. So he did miss by 15 pounds. And also, no longer under the USADA testing pool in LFA. Also, Formiga's a guy that has wins over Sergio Pettis, Bellator champion. Um, who else? Oh yeah, Davison Figueredo, former two-time UFC champion, and went to a split with Henry Cejudo. So I mean, Formiga is not some fucking slouch. And also, I gotta give Felipe a lot of credit, man, because when that shit was locked in, like, dude, none of us would have held it against him if he tapped. And this dude Felipe Bunes went to sleep. Like he went out like a warrior. And you know the squeeze of those black belts, man. I mean, that shit feels like your jaw's about to break, your windpipe's about to explode, like you're about to die. And he went out to sleep like a warrior, like a guerrero. You know what I'm saying? Did you see that video with Alex Pereira where they asked him his opinion on the whole top 10? And like, they'd be like Jamal Hill, he'd be like Guerrero. They'd be like, they'd be like Jiri, Guerrero, Israel Adesanya, Guerrero. And then they asked him one other guy, and like he like trashed him. And then the next five guys, he called him Guerrero.
Yeah,
So,
I do remember that.
so for those that don't know, Guerrero means warrior. But with Felipe, like my first thought of him, like if I had to describe him, Guerrero, you know what I'm saying? The dude's a fucking warrior, training with Fight Ready. Obviously he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, but what I like is that he really surprised me with someone like these kicks, some of those check knees up the middle. Like I feel like he's progressively been getting more explosive in a lot of his fights. He's been putting on size. He's getting more athletic. He's getting more experience. He's around the right people. And with Zhalgas, look, Zhalgas is a skilled guy, but Zhalgas fights close every single fight. And I'm not even talking about in the UFC. Go back and watch those fights in Russia. A lot of us thought he lost those fights, whether we're talking about the Ali Bagautina fight, whether we're talking
Definitely
about
definitely the Tagir fight.
the Tagir fight. Oh my God, that was bad. Even this one
Yeah.
on a lesser scale, but even the Tyson Nam fight was kind of, and then in the UFC, everyone's acting like he's been getting robbed these fights. And while one could say it's karma for what happened in Russia, I don't think that a lot of these fights have been the robberies people are trying to describe them to be. Actually, I was like, if you go on MMA decisions, I was like the only person that scored the Molina fight and the Charles Johnson fight against Zhalgas. And I actually stick to that to this day. Reason being, like, Jeff Molina like tripled him up on strikes. And then the Charles fight. So the Charles fight is one where I'll watch it, and sometimes I'll be like, I see why people thought Zhalgas won. But the reason that I scored it for Johnson initially is because, like, when you look at how Zhalgas was throwing, yeah, he was throwing a lot, but a lot of it was swinging at air. A lot of it was hitting glove, was hitting shoulder. He was missing. Whereas when Charles landed his shots, popping the head back, getting big reactions. So I actually thought he lost those fights, but regardless of if you thought he won or he lost, he's 1-5 in the UFC. He fights super close every single fight, and he's minus 175 here. So I think that this is a dog or pass situation, and I'm going to pick Felipe Bunes to upset Zhalgas Zhumagulov.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And another thing that like I keep in mind for this fight is, Felipe has worked his entire career to get to this moment. And you can see in his fights that his striking is improved. He's the more dangerous guy. You know, Zalgas just fights close in every fight. It's just I think it's tough to place him as favorite in this spot. Felipe is going to be a lot bigger. Zalgas is pretty tiny. And let's see, how old is Zalgas now?
No, but that's a good point. Before you pull up his age, I'm glad you brought up that he's tiny, because the criticism I had going into the UFC, Pepe, was that this dude will get bullied and pushed around and backed up in multiple of his fights. That's why I bet Holly and Paiva in that fight. And don't even try me on no robbery bullshit there either. So yeah, back to what we were saying. He gets bullied. He doesn't make it decisive enough. And I mean, he's minus 175, most importantly. So,
Yeah, Felipe is huge for the weight class too. He's going to be 3 inches taller with a 5 inch reach advantage. I don't know if he's going to implement takedowns against Zalgas, but he could if he wanted to. I just see him as being like the much stronger guy. I think he's going to be landing the harder shots. But sometimes he starts slow, and you know, we've seen in all of Zhalgas's fights, what the ones that do go to decision, he slows down. So this could be like a really good live betting spot. But even before the fight, I like a bet on Felipe.
Are you wearing a Carmela from Sopranos t-shirt there?
Yeah, yeah,
My dog.
yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Especially for I thought it was fitting too, picking Vettori in the main event to have a Soprano shirt on as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. Got to rep the East Coast. Not too long ago, I went back and watched all 6 seasons again. I fucking love that show,
It's
man.
a classic.
Yeah, it really is. Never gets old. And I'm not one that shits on the ending either. Like, I get why people wanted more, but like when you think about it, from Tony's perspective, he gets whacked, so everything goes straight to black. It's from his perspective. So I get why at first, because at first I was like, oh, what happened? Is this really it? Blah, blah, blah. But the more I've watched it, I'm kind of like, I think it's kind of like unique, and we're still talking about it to this day, which means it
Right.
was an effective ending.
Yeah, it's a just like the rest of the show, it's a classic ending, one that you can't forget.
So next up, also in the flyweight division, this time the women's flyweight division, we got Tereza Bleda. She's 6-1, taking on Gabriela Fernandez, who's 8-2. Currently, they got it. Tereza Bleda minus 240. The comeback on Gabriela Fernandez is plus 205. Another one that's kind of black and white for me, and I think you know exactly why. I mean, you know that if they stand up, Gabriela Fernandez is going to bust her ass up. And you also know that Gabriela Fernandez, I mean, literally anyone can take her down, and Tereza is going to look to take her down and will take her down. But man, there was a reason that I don't know. So whenever I film, I cap these contender series fights, right? So I watched the contender series fight, and then I skipped to the very end to see what Dana had to say about these fighters, why he's signing them or why he's not signing them. And he felt like Tereza Bleda was simply not ready for the UFC at the time. And in fact, when they signed her and she fought Natalia Silva, it was like a short notice replacement. So it's not like they had plans for her to be in the company. And Gabriela, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't she do her thing in LFA? Did she win a belt over there?
No, she didn't win a belt, but she had a couple wins.
Wait, no, she won an interim belt.
Oh, she had an interim belt?
Yeah. So when she fought Caroline Martins, it was a vacant interim
They hand
flyweight
those
belt.
WMMA LFA belts to anyone.
So, so she gets signed as a champ, loses to a top 15 fighter in Jasmine, no shame in that. But let's take away the Jasmine fight aside. I bet on Jasmine there at dog odds too, by the way, which is amazing. But I'd make that bet 10 out of 10, 10 out of 10 times. But the thing is, these lower level opponents were taking her down with the ease of ease. I mean, like literally no resistance, and that's not going to fly against Bleda. And while I think that Bleda is a fraud, and if you actually stand up to her, you get back up from those takedowns and you let her feel your presence. I mean, if Gabi can do that, I think she's got a chance here. It's just, do you think that when she gets taken down, that round's over and you got to start again next round?
Yeah, probably. So unfortunately, I made the terrible bet and Gabi against Jasmine in that last fight, which I was just completely wrong about Jasmine and Gabi. But I did, to give myself a little credit, I did go pretty damn big on Silva against Bleda, and I remember
That a boy.
that was like a contentious fight of Twitter for that week. There was a ton of steam on Bleda, and I had, a bunch of negative CLV, and I doubled down on Silva, and, obviously that's aging really well. But as far as this matchup, I don't want any part of it. Because I kind of lean Gabby in the spot at the current odds, but I just don't want to be yelling at my TV when she gets taken down and, you know, she gets.
Lucas Almeida, Pat
Yeah,
Sabatini.
exactly. It's like I don't want to be yelling when she gets taken down 30 seconds into the round and, the round is over and, the ref is, come on, you got to do more. You got to do more. And, they don't get to stand up. And it's just like, why did I do this to myself? So I'll be happy happy to sit this one out.
Man, the thing is, Gabi is like a unit, man. Like standing, like she's dangerous as fuck. She
Her
can hurt
striking's
girls.
good.
Yeah, and you don't like I talk about this all the time. When you get a chick that can actually drop other women, knock them out, hurt them standing, you stand out from the pack. So if she can just tighten this one thing up, well, two things: takedown defense and get up game.
Hmm.
Man, then she would whoop this girl's ass. It's just back to the when she gets taken out that one time and she's on her back for 4 straight minutes. The couple punches she landed earlier in the round, everyone's going to forget about them and she's going to lose that round. So I'm rooting for Gabriella. I really want her to win. I'm a much bigger fan of her style. But I think Bleda should get it off top control. I mean, if she can take down Natalia Silva, she can take down this girl. It's just you got
She
to take.
gassed out though.
True. It's just you got to take her down 3 times or 2 of 3 times and survive the last round.
I don't
So
know. I don't know if her. I don't think her top pressure and top game is going to be as good as Jasmine's either. So I don't
it's not,
know.
it's not, but the get up game of Gabriella, I mean, it might be improving, but like from what I've seen, it's kind of like like Douglas Lima. So we love Douglas Lima here from ATL, former multiple time Bellator champ, just a guy we all love. But the thing we always criticize with Douglas Lima is when he got taken down, like he's so content to close his guard and try to get that butterfly sweep. And when that doesn't work, he just lays on his back, no urgency to get back up. And on a much lower level scale, I think Gabriela Fernandez has some of those qualities. And again, it's the throw your remote at the TV kind of bet where she's going to tag her up as long as it's standing. But when she gets taken down and, 4 minutes fly by, that's when I'm going to be pulling out my chest hair since, there's no head hair.
Well, you know, and to give Bleda some of her flowers, she did win first round against Natalia Silva, and that's no easy feat. So I think the way I'm going to approach this is just to look to live bet Gabriella after round one. Hopefully she gets dominated, but you know she makes Bleda work really hard, and I can get plus 1,000 on Gabriella in between 1 and 2.
You'd love to see it. Now, next up in the bantamweight division, we got Ronnie Lawrence. He's 8-2, taking on Dan Argueta, who's 9-1. Currently, they got it Ronnie Lawrence minus 180. The comeback on Dan Argueta is plus 155. Now, I don't know if you're much of a stats guy. Do you look at stats at all?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, well, the stats say that this shit is fucking evenly matched. Like, not granted, only like what 2 or 3 fight sample sizes. Well, 4 for Ronnie, but only 2 fight sample size um for Dan. But granted, both those fights Dan had did go the distance, so we have 30 minutes of 30 minutes of evidence. So initially I was thinking like, because do you remember, like, how I was talking about how like when I watch the Contender Series fights, I don't just watch the fights, then I go back and I see why Dana did or didn't pick these guys, like, because it's not just coming from Dana's mouth. Prior to him going on camera, he's backstage with the matchmakers and they're discussing the reasoning. So, what he's saying is kind of influenced from Mick and Sean. And they said that they thought Ronnie Lawrence was special. And, for guys like that who have seen thousands of fighters over the years, to say someone's special, I took notes. So I was like, all right, let's pay attention if that's the case or not. And Ronnie Lawrence goes out there and, I mean, on the Contender Series lands 12 takedowns. UFC debut, 8 takedowns. Next fight, 3 knockdowns and 6 takedowns. But then he fought a better grappler than him in Saeed Yakub, and he's the one that got taken down 10 times, only landed 15 strikes. He got dominated. You can call it an off night, or you can give all the credit to Saeed Yakub, whatever you want to do there. So here, now are we looking at overcorrection? Are we looking at maybe we were simply wrong about Ronnie Lawrence? Like what do you kind of think is the case here? Because I don't want to write someone off based off one performance, but that one performance was so bad that maybe he wasn't the guy we thought he was. Take it a step further, Argueta can wrestle too.
Yeah, so my initial thoughts on the matchup were that Lawrence has shown that his takedown defense isn't great from the Kakramanov fight, and Argueta's a really solid wrestler. So Argetta should be the side. But the more I looked into it and the more I thought about it, I really I really don't like Argetta's striking defense whatsoever. If you go back to some of his LFA fights, like he's getting lit the fuck up on the feet. He barely moves his head. He's young, so he can be making improvements. But number one, I don't like his striking defense at all. And Ronnie can crack. Just ask Mana Martinez how hard he hits. Um, so I think Ronnie's going to have a significant striking edge on the feet. Um, and Kakramanov is an animal, like
Yeah.
Argetta's not going to have the cardio that Kakramanov showed in that fight. And, it was a perfect fight for Saidukub. Like the first shot he threw just like broke Ronnie's nose, and you could see him like touching it like a few times after. He's like, what the fuck? And like the rest of the fight, like he had trouble breathing and he just got completely dominated. But you saw what Saidukub did to Said Nurmagomedov when he fought
Yeah.
him too. No one's treated Nurmagomedov like that. So, that kid is built different. Um, but yeah, like in Argetta's last fight, you saw how much he slowed down after round one. He's so well muscled that like he's so rigid. He doesn't have good head movement, and I don't trust his cardio. I think Lawrence is going to win this fight at a pretty decent clip, but my concerns are the weight cut. Argetta's going back down to 135, and Lawrence has had trouble making 135 in the past. So I'm just hoping that there's no issues on the scales and we're actually going to get this fight. Um, but for what it's worth, I messaged Saidu Cub and I asked him who he thought he was going to win. And he thinks Argetta's going to win. He's like, Ronnie's wrestling is shit.
Yeah.
Dan's got this.
Let me say this though. When his fight got announced with Ronnie, the first thing he tweeted out was Ronnie Lawrence fucking sucks. So
I bet big on Saidu Cub in that fight too.
nicely done. Yeah. So he doesn't like the guy for some reason. I don't know what the deal is there, but I mean, I don't think the kid's wrestling sucks. You saw the numbers he put up. I just think that when you're going up against someone of the caliber of Said Yakub, who's taking down Nurmagomedov's, like, okay, that's different, but this is a little bit more evenly matched. But that being said, evenly matched minus 180 is their value at that line.
Yeah, it's tough. I ended up playing him at I think minus 150. Um, you hate like playing that much juice in a fight that could potentially be close and where there still are some questions. So, I wouldn't hate just passing at the current lines.
I think that Ronnie is the far more skilled fighter. I like the way he blends his striking to his takedown. Seems very educated, really good distance. But I think Argueta is actually the more physical guy, and I'm curious if that comes into play in this matchup. But I'm going to still pick Ronnie Lawrence to win this fight.
Yeah, and I could see Argetta having his best round in the first round, but I don't know. We'll see how good his control grappling is. And with the amount of scrambling they're gonna have to do, I can see Argetta gassing out, to be honest.
And last but not least, in the light heavyweight division, we got Modestas Bukauskas, former Cage Warriors champ. He's 14-5, taking on Zach Pauga, who is 6-1. Currently, they got it. Modestas, nearing up on minus 200. The comeback on Zach, plus 170. So, a lot of people have been giving Zach a lot of shit for his last fight against Jordan, saying he just hugged him up against the fence and this and that. Dude actually busted his ass up with elbows, was making him bleed all over the place, completely dominated those first two rounds. I mean, I thought he won the third round too, but that clinch heavy style is going to tax on the cardio a little bit. Would it have been nice to see him finish a guy like Jordan, who's kind of a glass cannon, gets finished in all his losses? Yes, but I mean, he still fought him smart, man. And those were good elbows in the clinch. With Modestas, he's going to be the bigger guy here, but he's not the most athletic. You know what I mean? He's not the fastest either. Does have a little bit of that tall man defense, but it does seem like, when he finds his range, he's got some good stuff, man. Isn't his dad like a former like badass fighter or something like from back in the day?
Yeah, they have like their own kind of martial art that I don't even remember what it's called, but he's like a black belt in whatever martial art his dad has.
But it's like a striking based martial
Yeah,
art that he's a black belt. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So I do think the size and the length of Modestas, especially at range, can give Pauga problems, but I'm not ready to stamp my flag just because, look, he did have a good upset against Tyson Pedro. There were rumors about Tyson being injured, but I'm not going to take anything away from Modestas. I just don't want to overreact to that one result. And I still think there's a lot of vulnerabilities in Modesta's game. And with Zach, he's super green. He's only 7-1. So you are going to be seeing improvements. Even in the Usman fight, I thought he was winning that fight until, he ate a disgusting blow that put him, that sent him into another weight class. But I'm not, discrediting his Jordan Wright fight. Like, yeah, it would have been nice to get the finish, but dude, he dominated Jordan Wright, and he didn't just hug Jordan Wright. He was busting his ass up in the clinch, nasty elbows, blood everywhere. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think obviously up close, you got to favor Pauga if he can get into the clinch, keep it dirty, but at distance, a little bit more towards Modestas. I think Modestas is a bit more experienced. So I'm going to lean with him, but I'm not interested in laying chalk on him in this spot. But he will be my pure pick.
Yeah, I like Modestas in this spot too. I think it's kind of a tee up spot for him. Um, I think the UFC was disappointed with Pauga's performance against Jordan Wright because they put him in a co-main event spot, and every Jordan Wright fight is super exciting and awesome and very entertaining except for that one. And I think they gave him a good opportunity to, make another highlight reel out of Jordan Wright, and he couldn't get the job done. Yes, he did win, but you know, that's the only time Jordan Wright's been able to survive 15 minutes in an MMA fight. So I think they're giving Modestas a very winnable fight. It's the first fight of the card. I think they want to draw some attention towards him and kind of build him up as the prospect, a redemption story. Everyone loves a good redemption story. Like they did it similar with Felipe Lins versus Grishin, where they were trying to push Lins as kind of like the prospect who's make climbing his way up the rankings, and they made it the first fight of the night. And I think they're doing something similar here for Modestas. But I think all the value is gone from the line. You don't want to be laying minus 200 on him, but I think the the punch that knocked Pauga out, the left hook, is Modestas's best strike. So I I wouldn't be surprised if he knocked Zach out in this spot.
So before we get out of here, Pepe, we got to talk about the fight to watch and the fighter to watch. So, in your opinion, what is the fight to watch for UFC Vegas 75?
It's got to be Torres versus Motta
And why is that?
because it's going to be just an explosion.
Yeah, no questions asked. For me, my fight to watch is going to be Raoni Barcelos versus Miles Johns. Look, these are two guys that came into the UFC with ridiculous amounts of expectations. People were calling Raoni WEC Aldo, and Miles Johns off his Contender Series fight. Dana White called him a savage. It looked like he was going to make an immediate impact in the bantamweight division. And he's had some ups and downs, and this is a true crossroads fight for both these guys. I mean, Barcelos loses this, and that might be it. And Johns, I mean, he's going to really have to go to the back of the line if he takes a L here. But a win, huge momentum, a big next fight, kind of borderline top 15 fight next for the winner here. So, and not to mention, it's going to be an exciting fight. I haven't seen a boring Raoni Barcelos fight. So, for that reason, Barcelos versus Miles Johns is my fight to watch. Now, Pepe, who is your fighter to watch?
My fighter to watch is going to be Christian Leroy Duncan. I think a win over Armen Petrosyan on the main card is going to be huge for his career. It's going to shoot him up the rankings, and you know, I think the kid might be something special. There's still a lot of questions, but I think this is a huge spot for him.
My fighter to watch is Felipe Bunes. Look, he's making his UFC debut. He's a champion in another organization. He's taking on a guy who's tough, but is 1-5 in the UFC. And it's even with the 1-5 record, you get that Zhalgas win on your resume, and it's a respectable win because he fights tooth and nail with everybody. And let's see if Felipe is ready for this opportunity. I will definitely have my eyes peeled to that matchup. So for that reason, Felipe Bunes is my fighter to watch. Well, Pepe, we did it. Firstly, thank you very much for joining me on this special edition of Half the Battle. All the fans can follow you at Pepe_Sylvia716. Any message for the fans before we get out of here?
No, I just appreciate you having on me. Thanks for the support. I love talking talking with people about fights, and this community has been awesome, and I'm a complete MMA addict. So if anyone wants to chat fights whenever, just DM me and I'd be happy to.
You love to hear it. And I personally think Pepe is one of the more underrated guys. So y'all definitely, he's married to the game, and you can tell when someone's passionate. So it resonates, man. So, all respect to you, and y'all make sure you give him a follow. For all the fans, thank y'all so much, man. Truly appreciate it. Smash the like button. When this is over, leave me a comment. Also subscribe to Half the Battle if you're not already subscribed. This Friday we got the technique of the week, a little Mike Malott guillotine coming up. I'm excited to break that down because it was a very interesting guillotine. So we're going to get into that on Friday. Saturday we got the UFC fights. Let's cash these bets. If y'all are going to PFL on Friday and you see me, don't hesitate to say what's up. So thanks again to everybody. Truly appreciate it. Best of luck this weekend, and until the next time, let's cash these bets.